I never thought I'd remember a summer morning at 11 so vividly, standing in front of the mirror in the sunlit attic room of the estate when I heard my mom calling from downstairs. "Lily, hurry up and clean, Claire's bringing her friends over to the pool." Claire. That name lingered in every corner of our luxurious Westchester, New York mansion, and in every forgotten part of my childhood. I'm Lily Marlowe, 25. But the memories of being invisible still feel as fresh as if they happened this morning. My family lacked nothing, except fairness. My father, George Marlowe, was the founder of Marlowe Strategic Holdings, a nationwide investment firm. My mother, Evelyn, came from a prominent Connecticut family and had once been the face of several major philanthropic campaigns. From the outside, we looked like the picture-perfect American success story. A Mediterranean-style mansion, 2 Mercedes parked out front, and carefully staged family portraits above the grand fireplace. But once you stepped through those mahogany doors, the truth had sharp edges. I was the second child, 4 years younger than Claire. She was born to be the star of the show, and the spotlight never dimmed. At 16, she got a silver Porsche Boxster at a birthday party with a private DJ, a cotton candy cart, and fireworks. On my 16th, my mom handed me a white envelope and said quickly, "Amazon gift card. You like books, right?" Claire failed math 3 times in a row, and my dad brought in a private tutor from Princeton. I aced the AP exam and got a flat response from Mom. "Good. Just don't get cocky." I used to hope, really believe, that if I just tried hard enough they'd finally see me. But hope eroded under the weight of blatant favoritism. Claire once wore my cashmere sweater to a party, tore the sleeve, then tossed it on my bed without a word. When I brought it up, Mom just said, "She didn't mean to. Why do you always have to make things a big deal, Lily?" Claire invited my close friends to her pool party and told them I didn't want to come. I only found out when one of them messaged me. "Claire said you weren't feeling the vibe. Are you okay?" The worst came in senior year. I spent the whole summer writing my college essay about living in my sister's shadow and how I found my own voice in the silence that surrounded me. Claire took my draft, changed a few lines, and submitted it under her name. I discovered it when I logged into the portal and saw my words published as Claire Marlowe's. I had to rewrite everything the night before the deadline, crying, typing alone in our dark kitchen. The next morning I confronted my parents. My mother folded her arms and sighed. "Claire's more sensitive than you. She's under a lot of pressure. You're the strong one, Lily." My dad didn't even look up from his financial newspaper. "Don't create drama. Sisters should support each other." I learned to keep my mouth shut. Not because I had nothing to say, but because no one was really listening. The only person who ever truly heard me was my grandfather, Harold Whitaker. He lived on the top floor of the mansion, in a paneled oak room with windows overlooking the rose garden. Harold was the founder of Whitaker Ventures, the parent company of Marlowe Holdings. But to me, he wasn't a billionaire. He was the first person to call me his little genius. "You wrote this?" he asked, holding up my 10th grade paper on the Cold War, eyes glowing. I nodded. He smiled. "You're the only one in this house who actually listens and asks the right questions." On weekends, he'd walk me through the garden with his engraved wooden cane, telling stories about companies he rescued from bankruptcy or times he walked against the wind when the market collapsed. "Sometimes, you've got to take the long way to get where you're going," he said when I complained about Claire's bullying. "A straight line isn't always the smartest path." When it rained, we'd sit in his polished library, and instead of fairy tales, he gave me financial reports to read. At 16, he started teaching me how to analyze cash flow and evaluate assets. "One day," he said, patting my shoulder, eyes serious, "you'll need this to protect yourself." I didn't fully grasp what he meant, but I trusted him. I believed in what he saw in me, even when my parents couldn't see past Claire's shadow. I'm not sure when I stopped hoping for fairness. Maybe it was when Mom told me not to brag about your grades. It might make Claire feel bad. Maybe it was when Dad insisted, "Claire will run the company one day because she fits in better." Or maybe it's still to come, on the day I discover that even trust can be measured, weighed, and stripped away. Because I haven't told you what happened next. After Grandpa passed. After the will was read. After the gates of the house I once called home slammed shut behind me. And I was dragged out by my hair. But that story isn't over yet. I still remember his final glance as the light faded from his eyes, like he was handing me a map I hadn't yet learned how to read. My grandfather, Harold Whittaker, wasn't the type to say, "I love you." But every time he placed a hand on my shoulder and tilted his head to ask, "What made you curious today?" my heart felt steadier. He never had to ask if I was okay. He just knew. On crisp fall afternoons, he'd wear his dark wool coat and take me out to the lake behind the mansion, where a small wooden boat named Astor waited. We set off when the water was glassy, the oars gliding quietly through waves as soft as breath. I didn't love rowing, but I loved how he told stories during those pauses in the wind. Stories with no princesses, no villains, just lessons I'd only understand much later. "Never trust someone just because they share your name," he once said, eyes distant like he was watching an old mast rise from memory. "Family is precious. But honor, that's what keeps you steady in the storm." I'd sit at the bow, chin on knees, listening as he spoke of compound interest like it was a legend. Sometimes he brought old financial reports, daring me to find mistakes in the balance sheet. "If you catch one line that doesn't add up, you just saved a company from scandal," he winked. And I'd grin, feeling like I held a giant secret. On rainy evenings, I'd go up to the attic library, where Grandpa kept his early business contracts from the days he first started out. He let me open every file drawer as long as I put things back exactly where they belonged. When I got curious about an investment deal that nearly bankrupted his company, he didn't hide it. Instead, he placed a file on the desk, leaned in, and said, "Losing money isn't failure. Dodging responsibility is the real failure." Over time, I began to understand that those lessons weren't about making me smarter than Claire. He was preparing me to survive in a world where fairness was a luxury. On my 17th birthday, he didn't give me anything expensive. Instead, he handed me a small dark wooden box. Inside was a silver pocket watch and a folded paper with a 3-digit code. "For when you need answers and no one's standing with you," he said, voice low like wind slipping through an unlatched door. I looked at him, ready to ask more, but he just shook his head. "Soon enough, you'll understand." Even as he grew weaker, he clung to his old routines. He refused a wheelchair until his legs could no longer hold him. He still asked for weekly grade reports, plus personal trend analyses. When I asked why I needed to learn to read people's behavioral charts, he replied softly, "Because in business, people won't attack you with guns. They'll use words and signatures." When doctors diagnosed him with late-stage pancreatic cancer, I stood in silence in the hospital hallway. My mother was busy on the phone with a charity event organizer. My father snapped, "How the hell did he hide this for so long?" I wasn't surprised he refused chemo. I'd already seen him calmly close his medical file like it was just another small contract. In his final months, he moved to the garden suite, where the light was always soft, and I was the only one allowed in without knocking. I managed his medications, tracked his symptoms, adjusted doses per his private doctor's instructions. But more than anything, I just sat with him, reading his favorite books aloud. Some days he said nothing at all. Just held my hand, eyes closed, like he was listening to memory itself. One evening in early April, he asked me to lock the door. The golden lamp glow touched his thin cheekbones like a layer of dust from another time. "Lily," he whispered, his hand trembling as it reached for mine, "someday you'll be betrayed by people who share your blood." I tightened my grip on his hand. "Don't say that. I don't want to hear it." "You have to," he said, voice weak but still sharp enough to slice through me. "If things don't go the way they should, look for the signal. I've made preparations." "What signal?" "In the watch," he answered, a rare clarity flickering in his eyes. "And an old friend, Victor Grayson. You'll find him when the time comes." I didn't understand, but I nodded. I'd learned to trust what he didn't say out loud. Before dawn the next morning, he passed in his sleep. It was lightly raining, as if even nature knew to stay quiet in farewell. My mother immediately called the media, planning a funeral grander than an awards gala. People who'd never met him showed up just to get their names listed on the final thank you notes. Claire cried in front of cameras, sunglasses on, platinum hair cascading over a tight black dress. I stood off to the side, one hand clutching the silver watch in my coat pocket, the other holding my balance in a world sliding off its axis. At the time, I didn't know the watch was more than a keepsake. It was a map. A signal. The only lighthouse he left me for a storm I hadn't even seen on the horizon. 3 days after the funeral, on a gray afternoon under a heavy sheet of cloud, I sat inside the dark-paneled office of attorney Stephen Whitlow, a man who had worked with my grandfather for nearly 30 years. The air itself felt like it was holding its breath. The antique pendulum clock marked each second like it was tapping against my chest, counting down to something about to break. My mother, Evelyn, sat to my right, hands clenched, crimson lipstick tight with tension. My father, George, kept his gaze fixed on the table like he was bracing for impact. Claire sat upright, heavily made up, sunglasses still on indoors, as if the truth would hurt less if she couldn't see it. Stephen placed a thick file on the desk, removed his glasses to clean them, then spoke slowly. The final will of Mr. Harold Whitaker, signed on February 9th, has been properly notarized. All terms will be read exactly as written. No one said a word. Only the rustling of pages. Stephen read through each clause. The charitable endowments, the small gifts to longtime staff. Then he paused, cleared his throat, and looked straight at me. All controlling shares of Whitaker Capital Group, representing 53% of total company value, will be transferred to Lily Marlowe. I froze. Claire's wrist jerked, silver bangles clinking. My mother gently pressed her shoulder, like trying to keep her from erupting. The Westchester estate, along with all real estate properties registered under Mr. Harold's name, will also become the legal property of Lily, Stephen continued, not a hint of hesitation in his tone. I didn't look at my parents, but I heard my mother hiss through clenched teeth. This can't be real. Stephen closed the folder, raised his eyes to us all. Claire Marlowe is granted an unconditional personal trust of $500,000. As for Mr. and Mrs. George and Evelyn Marlowe, Mr. Harold clearly stated, I believe the two of you already possess enough to continue your lives without requiring further financial support from the remainder of my estate. No one spoke. No one moved. Claire was the first to shatter the silence, with the screech of her chair against the floor. She stood up, eyes burning red. This is fake. There's no way he would do this to me. What did you do to get everything? My father stood up too, voice tight with anger. What the hell is this, Stephen? He wasn't in his right mind those last months. He could have been manipulated, or coerced. Stephen replied calmly, I met with Mr. Harold many times during that period. Each time he was evaluated for mental clarity and signed with a physician present. Everything was documented. Notarized. Legally valid. My mother slowly rose and turned toward me, her eyes sharp like polished steel. What did you do? Tell me. How did you get him to change the entire will? I didn't answer. I looked at her, then at Claire, then turned to my father, his fists clenched so tightly it seemed like he might smash the table. I didn't want to speak in that room. I saw it clearly. No matter how true my words were, they would twist them into something else. Just skewed enough for them to hold on to. That night, I went up to the attic where Grandpa used to live, opened the drawer where he kept Cuban cigar boxes and early drafts of major deals. In the middle was a small sheet of paper written in that familiar slanted script. If they react this strongly, it means we did the right thing. Be careful. Underneath was a small USB stick wrapped in dark velvet. Before I could open it, my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. Enjoy it. No one's letting you keep it. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't scared. But I did feel a chill, not from the threat but from knowing that from this point forward no one would be wearing masks. 3 days later, I found Grandpa's study ransacked. Some documents were missing. When I asked the old housekeeper, he just shrugged and looked away. One night, I saw my father talking quietly on the phone in the garage, muttering things like legal counsel, counterclaims, and asset reevaluation. The story I thought was over was only just beginning. A day before I was set to meet with my personal attorney to transfer management rights of the company, I received a court summons. The Marlowe family had filed for a temporary hold on the will's execution, citing concerns that the testator was mentally compromised. I sat in the kitchen, evening light casting long shadows across the dark wood floor. The silver watch was still in my coat pocket. I opened its cover, placed my fingertip gently on the inside, not to check the time but to remind myself. The fight ahead wasn't just about protecting assets. It was about proving that love, trust, and justice sometimes came from the only person who never needed me to try just to be seen. Everything changed that Monday morning after the court summons was delivered. When I returned to the estate after a meeting with my attorney, My access card no longer worked. I stood in front of the gate, swiped my card 3 times. Only a cold tone and a red message flashed back. Access denied. I had to call household staff to let me in. Peterson, the longtime butler, avoided eye contact as he opened the door. Lily, I don't know why, but Mr. George replaced all the access codes, he said softly, awkward. I stepped into the foyer without a word. The air inside the house felt thick. Every painting, every stair, every vase looked familiar, yet distant, like I was a guest in a home that used to be mine. In the dining room, my mother chatted on the phone, laughing in a voice sweet enough to rot teeth. Claire sat beside her, sipping espresso like she was at a spa. When they noticed me, my mother lowered her voice. Oh, Lily's back. We'll talk later, Rebecca. She hung up, then smiled thinly. You should rest. You look tense. Claire shrugged. Maybe go have some tea in the garden. A little sunlight might help you think straight. I didn't answer. I walked straight to Grandpa's study. The door had a new lock. A red seal strip crossed the handle, stamped with bold text from the office of Gregory Slate. Area under legal review. Do not enter without authorization. Gregory, my father's private attorney who once drank bourbon with Grandpa during strategy sessions, was now behind every quiet move like a shadow cloaked in legalese. It didn't take long to realize they were isolating me. My company email was suddenly locked. IT said they'd received instructions from senior management to secure data during the legal review. Files I had stored in my private safe had been rifled through. Some contract originals were gone. No one admitted touching them. When I asked my mother, she waved me off. You must be remembering wrong. Stress does that to your head. I requested to attend the upcoming board meeting. The assistant informed me it had been postponed indefinitely. Those who used to greet me with warm handshakes were now always traveling when I came by. Worse, they began attacking the things I couldn't control. Gregory sent my lawyer a set of documents, including a handwritten evaluation by an independent psychiatrist claiming Grandpa had shown signs of confusion and susceptibility to influence during his final 3 months. No signature from the family doctor who had actually treated him. But it was notarized. I tried to stay composed. Then Claire showed up at my room late at night in satin pajamas, her hair down, eyes glittering strangely. I don't think this has to go that far, she whispered from the doorway. You could stop now. I could talk to Mom and Dad. They don't need all of it, just a portion. I crossed my arms and leaned against the desk. You here to play the peacemaker? I just don't want you to drag yourself into ruin, she said softly. If you split it up reasonably, everyone will back off. No one wants this to go to court. I stared at her for a long moment. Those dark eyes had once looked at me like I didn't exist. Now they held something else: calculation, urgency, and fear. What are you afraid of, Claire? I asked. That I'll win? Or that Grandpa really did choose me and not you? She stayed quiet for a beat, then let out a small laugh, half mocking, half defensive. He wasn't in his right mind. Everyone knows that. Your story doesn't hold. And you're not the only one with proof. She turned away, voice dropping as she walked into the hallway. You can make the smart move, or you can destroy yourself. The next morning, I received notice from the court. They had officially acknowledged the request to delay the asset transfer, citing concerns of psychological influence and emotional manipulation during the drafting of the will. A copy of the letter circulated internally in the company, along with vague comments suggesting I had used personal proximity to the testator to seize control of shares. I was branded the girl who exploited her grandfather to take over the business. A label sharp as a knife sliding down my spine. At the same time, I discovered I couldn't access my personal bank account. My credit cards were frozen. Every financial stream Grandpa had left me was now on hold, pending court resolution. The walls around me were closing in. But I didn't run. I printed out every page of the will's copy, preserved every signed memo from him. I went to his private doctor and retrieved all his medical records, then hired a handwriting expert to authenticate the documents Gregory had submitted. I documented everything, every conversation, every unusual change in the system, every threat sugar-coated in a voice so sweet it stung. I wasn't going to beg for recognition. I was no longer the little girl tiptoeing outside the study door, waiting for my mother to nod in approval. Now I was quietly redrawing the map. Because Grandpa had once warned me on that foggy night. Watch for the signal, when they try to make you believe you're the problem. On Saturday morning, Peterson knocked on my door earlier than usual. His face was tight, missing its usual calm. "Miss Lily, they've requested your presence in the main conference room immediately." "Gregory is there, along with an unfamiliar doctor," he said quickly, eyes darting away. I followed him downstairs, uneasy tension curling in my chest. The conference room doors were shut. When I pushed them open, the whole family was seated like they were ready for a trial. My father wore a dark gray suit, his tie precisely aligned. My mother rested her hands on the table, fingers tapping the wood in slow, deliberate beats. Claire wore bright red lipstick, legs crossed beside Attorney Gregory Slate. The unfamiliar man stood near the window, wire-rimmed glasses on his face, holding a folder close to his chest. "Sit down, Lily," my father ordered without looking at me. I sat. The room smelled of cigarette smoke and something heavier, a kind of well-crafted deception. Gregory began. "We've brought in Dr. Raymond Eckhart, a psychiatric specialist, to review Mr. Harold Whitaker's medical records during his final 3 months." I tilted my head, voice cold. "Has he ever met my grandfather?" "Not directly," Gregory replied quickly, "but he was granted access to the records through the family's legal authorization." Eckhart nodded and began citing numbers, test results, and general observations. His voice was flat, detached, like he was describing a malfunctioning machine. "Based on the analysis, I believe Mr. Harold may have experienced cognitive impairment at the time the will was signed, particularly given the consistent presence of Miss Lily, who could have exerted emotional influence." I shot to my feet. "That's a blatant accusation." "Sit down," my father growled. "No one's accused you of anything. We're having a discussion." "A discussion?" I let out a dry laugh. "You drag in a doctor who's never spoken to my grandfather and wave around a stack of printed papers, and call that a discussion?" Gregory opened a folder and pulled out a letter. "We also found this in a private drawer. It appears to be a handwritten note from Mr. Harold, requesting a review of recent legal amendments near the time of his passing." I stepped forward and snatched the page. The handwriting was sloppy, so obviously forged it was laughable. I held it up. "This isn't his handwriting. Anyone who ever got a birthday card from him could tell you that." My mother rose and placed a gentle hand on Claire's shoulder in a choreographed move. "You have to understand, this isn't about being against you. But we have to be honest with reality. Harold was frail. He wasn't himself anymore." Claire quietly pulled out a tissue, her eyes damp. "I never wanted this, but I saw how you changed. He was easily swayed. I was worried." I stared at her, unblinking. "Who are you performing for? Or are you just lying to yourself now?" My father slammed his hand on the table, nearly toppling a glass of water. "Enough. Everyone sees this has gone too far. We need order. We need decisive action." He turned to Gregory. "Proceed with the asset suspension. File an emergency motion today." I took a step back, the floor feeling like it tilted beneath me. "Grandpa left everything to me," I said slowly, my voice hoarse. "Not because I asked, but because he trusted me." My mother stepped forward, eyes cold like a frozen lake. "You'll be leaving this house today. It's no longer a suitable place for you." I clenched my fist. "I'm not going anywhere. This is my home." My father stepped closer, shedding every trace of civility. "Don't make me use force." "Try me," I said flatly. What happened next moved faster than I could believe. Without another word, my father grabbed my shoulder and yanked my hair like he was trying to rip memories from every strand. "What the hell are you doing?" I screamed, struggling. My mother's voice echoed behind, unclear if it was panic or encouragement. Claire froze, one hand covering her mouth. Gregory didn't move. I was dragged down the long hallway, past the wall of wedding photos, past Grandpa's old wall clock, the only thing in this house still ticking with any honesty. The front door flew open. Rain was pouring. The stone driveway was slick and dark. He shoved me down onto the cold ground, my purse flung behind me, contents scattered across the wet stone. "Get out of my house, Lily," he hissed through his teeth. "Come back here and I'll call the cops for trespassing." I lay there for a few seconds, head throbbing, rain pounding down like icy fists. Claire stood in the doorway, giving me one last look. Not pity but challenge. The door slammed shut. A final, solid period. I sat up, my hand sliding along the slick pavement, gathering everything that had fallen. My phone, my wallet, Grandpa's silver pocket watch. I took a deep breath and quietly packed my things beneath the drumming of rain on the roof. It rained all night. I curled up in the back seat of an old Honda Civic, wrapped in a thin blanket Ashley brought when she picked me up from the estate gate. No one asked questions. She just drove me to her one-bedroom apartment on the Brooklyn outskirts, where the walls were half-painted and the hot water sometimes sputtered. I crashed on the sofa, using a duffel bag as a pillow, trying to shut off my brain every time I closed my eyes. But sleep always ended the same way, with a dull ache at my temple and the image of my father yanking my hair in the grand foyer. Ashley did everything she could to help, lending me clothes, folding the blanket each morning, having coffee ready, but I saw the growing worry in her eyes. Not just pity, she knew I was carrying a storm she couldn't shield me from. 3 days later, my phone stopped working. My account was locked. When I called customer service, they said the credit card had been canceled by the primary account holder. My bank account was frozen due to a legal dispute. I looked for work. Sent out nearly 30 applications in a week. 3 companies responded, 2 promised to call back, 1 offered an interview. I went there with a wrinkled resume, a borrowed blouse, and whatever hope I had left. The interview went relatively smoothly, until the HR manager looked at me and her expression suddenly shifted. "You're Lily Marlowe?" I nodded. "I'm sorry. One of our main investors just contacted us. I can't proceed with the hiring process." I left the office in silence, the outdoor wind biting colder at my collar than usual. My parents didn't just want me to lose the estate. They wanted me to lose the ability to survive. When my account balance dropped to $212, I pawned my smartwatch. Got $180 for it. Just enough to cover a few nights at a budget motel when Ashley let me know the landlord was pressuring her about unregistered guests. That night, I rummaged through my suitcase. Amid papers, scarves, and crumpled notebooks, I found the silver pocket watch, what Grandpa gave me when I turned 17. I had never worn it, but I kept it like a charm against being forgotten. I picked it up, gently turned it over. A tiny scratch along the rim made me pause. Something felt off. I pressed lightly on the metal edge, no reaction. I remembered his words, "Watch for the signal." I tried his old code, 216. A faint click echoed, soft enough that only someone who had heard it before would recognize it. The back popped open. Inside a hidden compartment was a neatly folded piece of paper and a small black USB drive, the size of my thumb. My hands trembled as I unfolded the note. The handwriting was sharp and slanted. His. "If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to protect you with my voice. But don't be afraid. Inside the USB is everything: evidence, backup accounts, and someone who will help you. See Richard A. Morrison, Phoenix, Arizona. Address enclosed below. He was the only partner I ever trusted. Tell no one. Hold the helm steady, Lily. Don't let them sink you." I sat in silence under the dull glow of the bedside lamp. The USB and letter lay in front of me like 2 pieces of a map leading to my way out. The next morning, I boarded a long-distance bus to Phoenix with 3 outfits, a crossbody bag, and a heart full of shredded hope. I couldn't afford a plane ticket, but I still had legs, hands, and rage that hadn't turned to stone. Richard Morrison lived on the outskirts of the city, a small ranch, quiet and sun-bleached. He looked to be in his 60s, tall and lean, salt and pepper hair, wearing a denim shirt and faded khakis. When I stepped off the bus, he was already waiting on the porch, coffee cup in hand. "You're Lily," I croaked as I approached, my voice hoarse from dust and 3 sleepless nights. "Harold said you'd come," he replied, unfazed. He brought me inside, made a pot of tea, opened his laptop, and helped me download all the USB data. File after file appeared. Original signed medical reports, audio recordings of private meetings, and videos my grandfather had recorded explaining exactly why he named me sole heir. There were also documents linked to 2 anonymous Swiss bank accounts, totaling nearly $1.8 million. He called it the Defense Fund in another attached file. "You've got enough to start," Richard said as I sat frozen before the screen. I didn't answer. Tears streamed down my face. not from relief but because he had always known what they would try to do. And he made sure I wouldn't be alone. That night, I slept in Richard's old attic room, surrounded by pine-scented wood and the slow spin of a ceiling fan. For the first time in weeks, I didn't dream of being thrown out. I dreamed of Grandpa standing in the yard, pointing to the sky, saying, "Walking into the wind doesn't mean you're on the wrong path." Richard introduced me to his attorney, Margaret Caldwell, a seasoned expert in estate disputes and financial crime. She looked to be in her 50s, sharp-eyed behind thin glasses, and spoke with laser precision. "We don't just need to win. We need to expose," Margaret said as she reviewed the USB files. "They built a stage play. We're going to rip down every backdrop in court." The first piece of evidence Margaret confirmed as solid was the video my grandfather recorded 3 weeks before he died. In it, he sat in the library wearing a light gray sweater, voice clear and firm. "Lily is the only one who understands the value of what I've built. I've prepared to hand the company and property to her. Not because I love her more than the others, but because I trust her more than anyone." Immediately following that was a brief clip from his private physician. Cognitive testing, reflex checks, and verbal responses. He answered everything coherently, even recited his bank account ID code from memory. "I'm not recording this for today," he said at the end. "I'm recording it in case trust is ever weighed against manipulation." Margaret nodded. "This alone is enough to dismiss claims of cognitive decline. But we need more if we want to leave them no exit." We hired a private investigator, Carlos Beckett, who had once helped Richard on a corporate fraud case. Carlos had a chiseled face, spoke little but cut to truth like a blade. In just 10 days he returned with thick files, hundreds of photos, bank statements, and recorded calls from contacts in the casino industry. The truth unfolded in sharp layers. Claire had a hidden account in Atlantic City with nearly $600,000 in transactions over 4 months. 3 casinos had extended her high-interest loans. Within 3 days of the will reading, all debts were cleared. The payments had come from a subsidiary of Marlowe Holdings, a fund never disclosed in annual reports, managed by Evelyn Marlowe. Carlos also uncovered 2 large cash withdrawals from an account linked to Gregory Slate, made just 2 weeks after that handwritten letter from Harold surfaced. Metadata from the Word document showed it had been created on Gregory's law office computer, 2 days after my grandfather passed. Margaret slapped her hand on the table. Forgery. Asset abuse. Board deception. 3 arrows at once. I contacted Peterson, the old house manager, through an anonymous email. It took him 3 days to respond, short and clear. "I've seen enough. I'm ready to testify." At a private meeting in Margaret's office, Peterson brought a recording made using a mini device clipped inside his work folder, captured during the meeting held right after I was thrown out of the house. My mother's voice was clear. "We need to get Gregory back to the estate office, now. If she wins, everything goes up in smoke." Then my father chimed in. "As long as the court delays asset transfer, we'll pull all capital from the fund Harold created. Claire can use that money to settle things off the record." Margaret held the recording, her eyes lighting up like she'd just found the final piece of a giant puzzle. "Peterson will testify, Gregory will be investigated. We file the civil suit immediately. But it has to be filed before they destroy any more evidence." The next morning, the official lawsuit was filed in federal court. Lily Marlowe versus George, Evelyn, and Claire Marlowe, Gregory Slate named as co-defendant. The charges included evidence tampering, misappropriation of assets, abuse of legal authority, and obstruction of lawful execution of a will. The press release was carefully prepared and sent to 2 major business newspapers. 3 hours after the news broke, Marlowe Holdings stock dropped 14%, and the investment board called for an emergency session. At the same time, we sent an anonymous email to every board member containing my grandfather's video, the handwriting analysis, audio recordings, and excerpts from internal financial reports. Margaret looked at me once the final filing went through. "They tried to drag you into the mud. Now you're turning that very mud into what buries them." I didn't smile or feel relief. I just nodded and replayed the video of my grandfather looking straight into the camera, hand on the desk, voice steady as bedrock. "If someone is trying to twist what I've left behind, let the law decide. But if justice falters, the truth will still find a way." I shut the laptop and looked out the window into the quiet light. Not the light of triumph. Just a sky beginning to reveal the sun through layers of clouds warped by people who thought they could control the weather. The courtroom was packed that morning. Reporters crowded the hallway, TV cameras straining to catch each person stepping through the dark wooden doors into a space where truth was no longer decided by money or connections. I sat quietly on the left bench, my hand lightly gripping the silver watch in my coat pocket. Margaret stood beside me, upright and composed as always. Across the room, my father had his head down, jaw clenched. My mother sat motionless, her expression unreadable, grief or fear I couldn't tell. Claire kept her head bowed, both hands wringing a tissue. Gregory stared forward, stone-faced, but a clear streak of sweat shone under the lights. Judge Bertram Quinn read the ruling in a steady voice, not a word wasted. After thorough review of the evidence, recorded video, witness testimony, and verified financial documentation, the court finds that Mr. Harold Whitaker was of sound mind at the time the will was executed. He paused for a few seconds, his gaze shifting to me. The court rejects all documents submitted by the defendants showing signs of forgery. The original shall take immediate effect. The estate is awarded to Lily Marlowe. The room fell silent. I didn't look at anyone. Didn't smile. Didn't cry. Just exhaled a breath I'd been holding for what felt like months. The judge continued, his tone sharper. As for defendants George and Evelyn Marlowe, along with attorney Gregory Slate, this case file will be referred to the district attorney's office for further investigation into forgery, misappropriation, and obstruction of will execution. Leaving the courthouse, I didn't stop for the reporters. Margaret blocked all questions. I walked to the car with a mind as still as a lake frozen after a storm. The next day, the Marlowe family was officially ordered to vacate the Westchester estate within 2 weeks. I sent a formal notice requiring them to take only personal belongings. Not a single item belonging to my grandfather. I got 3 calls from my father. I didn't pick up. 1 message from my mother, just 3 words: we were wrong. At dawn on their moving day, I stood at a distance near the foggy driveway. No one looked in my direction. No apology, no glance. They left in 2 faded SUVs, vanishing after the final bend in the road. I didn't go inside right away. I just stood there a long while, clutching the keys like I was holding the last breath of a place once called home. After assuming full control of the estate, I held a brief press conference. I didn't say much. Just announced 2 things: that I would transfer the majority of company shares into a trust named after my grandfather, the Whitaker Trust for Ethical Business, and that the Westchester estate would be sold, with all proceeds going to fund scholarships for business students with financial need. 3 weeks later, I left New York. Moved to Boston. The trust's new headquarters sat near a leafy park, where I could hear the rustling leaves every morning. I rented a modest attic apartment. I didn't need a large living room or a private elevator. Just enough sunlight through the windows and a worn wooden desk to work on. I used part of the estate to build a mentorship network for small businesses, especially young women entrepreneurs in underserved areas. I didn't want to keep justice for myself. I wanted to do what Grandpa believed in, plant belief where others were afraid to even dream. One Friday afternoon, my assistant handed me a beige envelope with no return name. Inside was a handwritten letter. Lily, no one can change the past, but someone who knows they've hurt others can try not to repeat it. I'm not here to take anything back. I just want to say I'm sorry. I've started addiction treatment, and I'm trying to rewrite, not my life, but how I live with the pieces I broke. If someday you're ready to listen, I'll sit down and tell you everything. Claire. I kept the letter in a drawer for weeks without replying. Until one early autumn afternoon, when the sunlight outside turned the roof tiles across the street a soft amber, I texted her. We met at a small cafe, quiet, unpretentious. Claire arrived with little makeup, dressed simply. She stayed silent for the first 5 minutes, then finally spoke in a voice small but steady. Not everyone gets the chance to make things right. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know, I understand now how awful I was. I didn't speak right away. I just looked into eyes that no longer held the defiance of the past, no longer carried the hollow pride that once left me breathless. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, I said. But if you truly want to make things right, you'll need to do more than just apologize. She nodded. I've started by going back to study finance. With money I earned myself, not from any shared account. We talked for over an hour. No reconciliation. No return to being close sisters. But there was a silence placed between two people who once were unspoken enemies. A quiet kind of decency. That night I stayed late in the office, looking up at the photo of Grandpa hanging behind my desk. His eyes in the picture were still deep, still asking questions. I smiled and touched the silver watch. I couldn't hold on to everything, but I held on to what you believed in. The wealth he left behind wasn't in bank accounts. Not in real estate or stocks. It was in the belief that I could stand tall. When everything fell apart. When family turned away. When honor was dragged through the mud. I didn't seek revenge. I just stepped out of the shadows carrying the flame he lit. From a girl rejected and slandered by her own family, Lily Marlowe rose above the pain to claim justice with resilience and intellect. She not only protected her grandfather's legacy but transformed the hurt into strength, creating a charitable trust that promotes ethics in business. Today she lives simply in Boston as the founder of the Whitaker Trust and a role model for anyone who's ever been betrayed. Lily's life is proof that true worth doesn't come from blood. It comes from courage and belief in what's right. What do you think about Lily's journey and her choices? Would you have done the same if you were in her place? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, emotional stories about family and life.